What's up, boys? We got a cool one for you today. I have the opportunity to interview the OEM team and ask them some of your most asked questions. It's a long one, so make sure you stick around to the end, and I don't mind the footage. It's a little peppity server stuff. I don't know, there's some good races in there, but let's just jump right on into it.
So, I'm Alpha, the head of feedback with the OEM team. Keep everybody in line. I'm the prison guard here.
Hi, I'm JVDL. I'm head of texturing. I also do modeling for OEM, and I'm currently working on official graphics for OEM, and yeah, doing a bit of everything really.
I am Jesse Mulock, everybody's favorite target. I do all the physics stuff, all the tires, and take the brunt of everybody's anger.
And make the TMs OP.
TM love.
TM love. Alright, well, now that we got that out of the way, do you guys want to jump into some questions?
Do it.
Yeah, sure.
So, the first question, we're just going to go through general questions and then we'll get into some physics. The first question is, how can you guys keep releasing patches constantly, updating them all the time, working around the clock, especially when you guys have your own personal jobs?
So, for us to keep releasing patches, it takes a lot of time and determination from us. But ultimately, we do it because we like to see what can happen with it, what we can make, and how we can make the community better with every release. Lots of learning involved and slowly getting better with what we do. Of course, long ago now, seems like forever, we introduced the supporter program to give people a way to support us and donate to us. And rather than just taking the donation, we wanted to give back a little bit. So obviously that comes in the form of the model swaps, the GUID lock stuff, early access to PSDs, stuff like that. And
Now the preview bikes.
You know, it just helps us in general maintain the free aspect of the OEM pack, because if we get money from the supporter program, we can put it back into OEM if we need to, rather than it coming out of our own pockets and stuff like that. So you guys really make the OEM pack happen, and we really appreciate that. Of course, we literally couldn't do it without the community. So yeah.
Yeah, community plays a large part in what we do and why we love it. I mean, another thing that we love is just making discoveries and actually just trying to make the stuff that we do better and better every day. I mean, just being on the hunt for the next new thing to improve on what we already have is, I don't know, it's addictive, especially when we are able to share it with you as a community and hear you being excited just as much as we are about all the new stuff. So it's really nice of you guys to actually provide us feedback that we can just rely on, and feedback that we can actually do something with, because it helps us to push the game towards the goal where everyone wants to be.
Mr. Jesse, you have anything to add to that?
I mean, this whole game is kind of like a guilty pleasure for probably everybody at this point. We all know how wonky it can be, and we're all still playing it for whatever reason and trying to make it as good as we can. And
Yeah, well, it's a reason why we have something like Pibozo.
Yeah. Every time we make some kind of update, whether it's good or bad in the community's eyes, we're trying new things and trying to figure out the Pibozo and work out of it and around it. And sometimes we hit it, and sometimes we don't, but we're always looking to make it better. Yeah, as JVDL said, it can kind of be addictive at points.
Well, yeah, I mean, just the biggest part of not knowing is kind of addictive. At least for me, it's always just wanting to know how something works, and then you get a game like MX Bikes where, yeah, virtually nothing makes sense and everything is just a big question mark, and you just try your best to make something out of it, and that's what is addictive about it, at least to me. But I think it's the same for everyone on the OEM team, else we simply wouldn't be where we are right now.
Alright, well, while it's addictive, I'm sure that there are some difficult things that happen in making the bike. So what would you guys say, like, one or two things is the most difficult part about updating and or making the bikes?
I think balance might be one of the biggest things. I mean, we try to incorporate like all the characteristics of the bikes that you have in real life, and I mean, it's a reality that not all the bikes feel the same in real life. I mean, there is a lot of commotion about it in real life as well, but then having that in a game and wanting to have a game where everyone is able to just play their favorite brand of motorcycle, it's kind of tedious to get them all in the same playing field. But I think Jesse might be able to elaborate a bit more on that.
Yeah, finding a balance between however many bikes there are in each class, 10, 15, 20 bikes that can get raced in any particular category. Sometimes bikes come together easier than others, but then you get the whole pack, and as we've all seen this year, you have like the Yamaha 450 that it's the only bike that gets used 90% of the time, or the Honda 250, and just trying to figure out what it is that makes those bikes tick so well with the community, and how to get the rest of the pack to follow suit without losing the OEM vision of representing the real bikes.
I was just gonna say, that's the hard part. I mean, really, now we have a lot of testers of all different skill levels, so we can usually, find what bike is the best, judging on their feedback and stuff, but physically getting it, to be level with the rest, or otherwise bringing other bikes to the level of that best bike is just difficult. Takes a lot of time and a lot of troubleshooting. That's something we're working on all the time. Hopefully we can find an answer and balance the pack a little bit better in future.
All right, well, I think this will take us over into now. These are going to be physics-specific questions, and you guys have kind of already touched on this, but I'm just going to go through this one anyway because I think it's a good question. What are your guys' thoughts on balancing the bikes between making them perfectly accurate versus making them work well in game? I know that there's been a lot of questions about that. A lot of people have just said, well, why don't you just make it work for the game? And I'm just curious on what your guys' perspectives are on that.
I'd say, the original goal was to have every bike as one-to-one with real life as possible, using, real life values and specifications where we can. However, all that resulted in, obviously, was massive imbalance. Some bikes were horrible and some bikes were great. So at this point, we're definitely straying further away from that one-to-one idea to hopefully, just make the bikes more balanced again. I mean, this simulation isn't perfect in MX bikes, so we kind of have to look for something to suit the game a little bit better, and it's a pain. It's a pain, but I think we're in the right direction. So, and you guys have always, you guys have been very supportive of the preview bikes and the way they're going. So I think we've struck a pretty good balance of one-to-one and physics that actually suit the game. So hopefully we can do that in the future. I don't know if Jesse wants to add something to that as the physics guy.
Yeah, that's also not to say that we're straying away from real life values. It's just there are some bikes that are a lot easier to find specs for than other bikes. I'm sorry for anybody who tries to look up anything for a TM or a beta. Good luck. And then you have bikes like Honda that have so much aftermarket support. You can find every possible value and spec and length and weight for everything on the bike.
Almost every value that you're looking for.
Yeah, almost.
Almost.
So we're still working within that accurate to real life mindset, and once we get the bike set up as good as we can to that, then it starts adjusting it to work with the game. Even with the preview KTMs that are out, they're still very accurate to real life, and the things that do change to work with the game are just that. The actual bike itself is still largely one-to-one as far as what we've been able to find.
I think that would kind of lead me into my next question, which is how much of Paboso's physics contribute to the wackiness of the OEM physics, and is it possible for that to be fixed? Because I know that there are things like on the KTMs where you guys were talking about, the KTMs are air fork in real life, but there is no air fork option for bikes.
So with air forks, there is some really basic air fork simulation in game, but it's so far from finished, it's not worth even looking into. We have tried. So we just grabbed fork specs from Spring WP forks.
So back to that just kind of basic question is, how much of Poboso's physics do you guys think contribute, or just the game in general contribute to some of that quote-unquote wackiness of the OEM physics? And is it possible for that to be fixed? I think you guys kind of already answered this question a little bit with the OEM preview, but do you guys you guys want to elaborate on that at all?
I think it's maybe a little bit of a combination, to be honest. I mean, sure, we're dealing with physics problems that we can't explain simply, because a lot of the game is undocumented. A lot of the stuff that we do is just pretty much through trial and error, because there isn't a manual somewhere telling us how to make a bike, or what values do what, or how we should actually get the values we need for the game in any way. I mean, if you go look at the bike wiki that is actually up, then there is very little there. So a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with is simply trying to discover what Poboso had in mind when just making bikes in general. Then of course, like just you already said, we are also dealing with the time difference. Like, most of the stuff is like based around an old bike, while we have brand new bikes with brand new features that are just not supported, and we have to look for alternative ways to actually bring that across, which is very difficult, because I mean, you can think of an idea, but then us not knowing exactly how that should work in Poboso logic, that just makes it like very tedious to even get anywhere with it, to be honest.
Yeah, everything that we do to the bikes, a lot of it has been documented by other modders from the past, whether it was Asdriel in old OEM bikes on the forum, or even older members of the GP Bikes community, digging into Poboso's DMs and hoping he actually answers our questions with something that's useful. There's a lot of resources that are available, but there's even more just empty holes of knowledge that we either have to figure out through our own testing or find the next best accommodation for it. At its heart, it's based on a street bike game, and there is just always going to be some amount of wonk that doesn't carry over to dirt bikes.
That's true, and I think also, like, sometimes we do run into problems that are simply just physics related, as in they need to be fixed. But when will we see a fix for the game? I don't know. I mean, I think no one knows. I don't even think Poboso knows. So yeah, sometimes we do have to do with something that is not as we want it to be. But yeah, we'll do our best.
That would lead me to my next question, which this question is it possible to get a full rework of the new OEMs so that they have their own characteristics but still decently balanced, so that it's just not a meta and there's more variety? Again, I would say that the new OEM pack probably, is answering part of that question, but I don't know. Alpha, do you have anything on that one?
I'd say yes. A full rework is like kind of in the pipeline, as you see with the preview bikes. That said, I mean, we'll do our best, obviously, that we can promise you, but at the end of the day, it is a video game, and meta exists in any competitive scene in any video game. The real goal is just to make everything else as competitive as it physically can be. So if there is a best bike, you're not facing as much of a disadvantage for using something else. That's the goal. Every bike will still have its own characteristics, obviously, because as Jesse touched on earlier, we're still using like 1-to-1 values as a baseline, and that usually gives us the characteristics of the real life bike. But of course, then we're adjusting on it further to make it work with the game and make it balanced.
Yeah, I don't think there's really any way to completely remove the meta with no matter how many times we work on the bikes and update them. But the smaller that we can make the gap from bike to bike, so everything's usable and everything's fairly competitive, even if there is a meta bike, you can hop on something else and not be 20 seconds off.
Yeah, if I may, I mean, I think one of the things like with having the characteristics of a real bike in game. I think there is a reason why you pick a certain bike in real life. It's because it either matches your riding style or it doesn't. You don't pick a bike because you think it's the fastest. You pick it because you have fun riding it and feel best on that bike, and that's really what is there in MX bikes as well, because there are very different ways of playing. Like if you just think about controllers, or how you hold your controller, or how do you have your controller set, and your input values, etc. There is difference in style of riding, and it really is about just finding the bike that best suits your style of riding. And sadly, we don't see a lot of that happening. It's more like, oh, that's the fastest guy, he rides Yamaha or whatever, and then I'll start playing Yamaha and do that for the rest of the time until there comes someone that actually beats the fastest lap time on a different bike, and then we all jump on that bike.
I think some of that also comes down to a lot of the bikes, if you just ride them, they are very like similar to each other with different riding styles, up until you push the game so far that the tire model can't keep up. Like, you can have a bike that's more torquey or more top end, shorter, longer gearing, and that's all fine and dandy until the weird tire model can't work anymore, and you're just stuck to the one way of playing that does still work at that point. Like Alpha actually races, Doc races. You guys can talk on how at that level it's kind of all the same thing.
Well, that's kind of what I was going to touch on, is like, personally, even in its current state, I do think that the bikes are all pretty balanced. It's just when you're trying to squeeze every, 10th or 1000th out of a lap. I mean, this is what happens in any game. If you guys ever played, Apex or Fortnite or whatever, in Fortnite there was even meta skins, that people would run, and they literally gave no advantage, but people had preferences for those specific skins or whatnot. And I think, like, you look at Apex,
cockpit comfortability.
Right. I mean, I think and that's what I was just gonna say. Like, I think if you made every single bike exactly the same, there would probably be a quote-unquote like meta model that people wanted to run.
Oh yeah.
That seemed like that was the best looking model for there, and it helped them not clip their bars or whatever. And I mean, the meta is an interesting topic. I feel like any game I've ever been, involved in competitively, Apex, Fortnite, Tarkov, there's always the conversation of like meta, and it doesn't mean that other things aren't viable. I think part of the problem is that the meta usually is dictated by like 0.01% of the player base, and it's just the quote-unquote pros of whatever scene, whatever game that they're in. They're the ones that kind of dictate the meta, because they're trying to squeeze every 0.1 second out of a lap time, when the reality is that out of the 2,500 players every day, there's only 30 to 50 people that actually are going to be able to use that to their advantage, and everyone else should probably just stop bandwagoning and probably just ride wherever they want,
Yeah.
But
TM love.
TM love. I held off skills on the TM for a long time on Red Button, and then I crashed, but that's a skill issue.
Yeah.
All right.
I think it's kind of the same like in real life. When you ride a 4-stroke, then sure you are faster, but when you get your ass on a 2-stroke, then you feel a lot faster. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there. There's also a lot of superstition. Like you already said, like in other games where you had a meta skin that give you actually no benefit. It's how it works. I mean, I still remember like when I was playing Motocross Madness 2, when you actually beat the game, which took like forever, then we get the most hideous golden bikes, like you have a gold AK in Call of Duty or whatever. But those bikes, they weren't any different from the other bikes, but for some reason I ended up running them every time when I entered the tourney, and actually just felt very fast and confident on it. And feeling fast and confident is really what wins the race. I mean, if you just have something in game that makes you feel good about yourself and makes you feel fast, then you will be fast, because you just don't doubt yourself as much. And I think that's something that a lot of people forget.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway is that, all the bikes are good except for the gas. Just kidding.
Man, we put so much time into trying to fix that gas, and it still wouldn't work. don't care.
Rip gas. All right, moving on. This is a question that I actually am interested in hearing. Any plans on updating the tires? You guys have already kind of alluded to, you know, the bikes are good up to a point of when the tires give out. And if so, what's the current goal of said update? Is it more grip across the board, more realistic tire wall grip? Can you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Let Jesse
So,
elaborate on that one.
like I said earlier, with the lack of documentation and the weird scarcity of knowledge that there's even less about the tire physics model and how it all works. I'm always trying to make things more accurate and more realistic as much as I can. And we do have some whip tires that we're working on in conjunction with all of the next update of bikes. But it's a hard balance between making a tire just grip more and be faster and trying to make a tire that behaves realistically, even if it's slower. That's like a really delicate balance, especially when you're looking at the community feedback and the loud children that just say more faster, more better.
Well, the thing that you said slower doesn't necessarily mean slower. It does mean better, like in every word, because slower might mean that we get less Pibozo physics happening, like you just get killed in a corner for no reason. It all has to do with how the simulation model works, and if it works or if it doesn't work. So slower doesn't necessarily mean slower, it just means better in general.
Yeah, I think we would all prefer if we had to go slower, but the loss of traction was linear instead of rapid. That I don't think there would be a single person that complained about that, you know?
It's also just difficult to do because of the fact we're essentially working on a street bike tire model. You'll notice a lot of similarities in the MX bikes tire model versus, you know, the GP bikes tire model, because it's the same skeleton, you know, just with a couple extra values added to sort of make it like a dirt bike. Yeah,
But even then,
it's-
talking to Pibozo or even Snap about the tire model and the few things that they did try to do to make it more of a dirt bike tire don't necessarily make sense.
Yeah.
Or at least from their explanations, don't behave the way that you would think it should for whatever aspect of a knobby tire it is. So then you're left trying to figure out whatever they were thinking, plus what it's actually doing, and how you want it to behave.
Yeah, a lot of guesswork, a lot of testing and all that involved. At the end of the day, you know, this isn't real life.
I think something that I would like people to take away from this conversation, people watching the video, is, I mean, just how little support that you guys have from the game, and how much of it is really trying to read somebody else's mind on what they intended and then trying to make it work. Like, I honestly can't imagine, aside from all of the like nerdy computer stuff that I cannot compute, that aspect alone of trying to read Pibozo's brain or whatever their half-finished work and then make it complete, and trying to make a dirt bike game based off of a street bike game. Like, I don't know if a lot of people really know that's what the engine's really built off of.
Exactly.
And I think that when you think about that, a lot of those losses of tractions actually make a ton of sense when you think of it as a street bike game. Especially, you know, it's when you double downshift into a corner and you kind of just like drift into it. It's like exactly like a supermoto game, or like it feels like supermoto all the time. And when you lose traction in the corner, it's very very similar to how you would lose traction if you were on a street bike, I would think, in, you know, through a corner.
Yeah, it's a snap
Right.
of oversteer.
Right, and if you watch GP in real life, you know, street bike races, that's exactly what happens. They go through a corner and then all of a sudden they're like just completely stepped out sideways, where it's rarely how it happens in a dirt bike. It's really interesting. I doubt a lot of people know that.
And then you get those one-off situations like at Arlington, I think it was, where Chase Sexton just 360'd off of a rhythm section jump, and it's like, hey, I just did that yesterday in bikes.
Yeah, he got Pibozo'd for sure.
Yeah, big time.
I will say, for anybody who is actually curious about how all of this works, go to the MX Bikes forum and the Pibozo forum and just dig through the physics threads and see what kind of nonsense there has been over the years that we're trying to decompact. Like, it's just silly. Asriel has a great write-up on like how to OEM a bike, and it's not 100% obviously, but there's also been a lot of stuff that we've learned since then, but it's still like basically the Bible to go off of for how to make a bike even somewhat accurate to real life.
Yeah, I think that the hard part about it as well is that like it's almost like a constant sorry, it's almost like a constant battle that we're fighting with the game, so to speak, and every now and again we just make a new discovery, and we can't always implement the new discovery because we don't have the time, or it would just have too much impact in general, and that really makes it difficult sometimes because like we want to get the best out of everything, but we can't do it all the time because it's simply not possible to share it across the entire fleet because we have so many bikes, and that yeah, it's like eventually we get there, but time is of the essence, so to speak, as in we don't have all the time in the world. We actually do have like lives besides working on OEM, and sometimes it's very hard to find all the right time to do everything we want to do and everything we discovered, because the Bible, like Jesse said, for OEM in general, I mean, it's ever growing. Like every day we'll make a new discovery, like maybe it's this or maybe it's that, and we try to deep dive into it, but we can't always do it because we also want to be able to produce updates on a regular basis, and sometimes that does involve some decision making. We get there eventually, and we always do, but yeah, it's difficult.
Alright, so one of our next questions is, why are you guys charging for handguard models that were previously free?
Too long didn't read. We aren't really. Previous OEM versions obviously had the OEM additional downloads with free handguards for the bikes that we had available. That would be the old Cowie model and the Honda model from LC. Obviously the Cowie is irrelevant now, we're using a new bike, a new model. The Honda still works, those model swaps still work fine. We're selling new handguard models because the models we have now, most of them are made in-house instead of being outsourced from places like the MX Sim forums and other creators out there. It's essentially just a way for you guys to get something in return for supporting us. That's the basis. You know, $5 donation, you get, I don't even know how many are up, 25, 30 model swaps, various bikes with various parts. That takes a lot of time, like a lot. Anyone with experience in 3D modeling knows it's very not easy to learn, not easy to master, just takes a ton of time. So that's essentially it. It just takes a lot of time, kind of as a way to make that time worth it while also giving you guys something in return. That's essentially what that is.
Yeah, it takes a lot of time. Like for modeling, it's not like 5 minutes and we have handguards. A lot more goes into it, and a lot more like textures need to be made, and then we need to make all the model swaps happen in game. And if you just take a look at how long Frankie, for example, spends on just getting that stuff ready and exported with all the different variations that there are, like all the different combinations, it takes him so long to do. Yeah, it's something to easily overlook because it looks like it's just handguards, it's just a very tiny bit, and that shouldn't take too long, but that's just not the case. A lot of it just takes a lot of time, and I think it's easy to forget that stuff takes time.
Alright, well, let's move to the Enduro section. I know that there was a few people asking about that, and somebody wanted to know, is it possible to make Enduro OEMs with the pack, and how difficult is it to work with the game's physics?
Well, it's definitely possible. We've had Enduro bikes before. It's more so of we've been putting in so much work to get these motocross bikes to a place where the community is happy with them and we're happy with them. We just haven't had time to focus on the Enduro pack. At some point, when we finally get a free second to work on it, we're definitely going to make and release an updated Enduro pack with a bunch of the new bikes. It's just, we keep finding things that need to get updated and fixed on the motocross bikes, and Enduro gets pushed further and further away.
So is it possible to maybe just update, I don't know how simple this is, but update the Enduro bikes with the current tires so that they are quote unquote, usable? That's I think one of the biggest issues on, say, Krakenberg is the Enduro bikes have the old tires, and so it's just like riding on ice.
So there's a fun two-part thing with that. Yeah, it's easy enough to update all the tires to all the Enduro bikes. We just need to re-register them and have Insane push out an update. Part of the funniness about like Krakenberg and the slippery ass tires is in one of the last updates to the game where Paboso changed tractions and tires and material types. The compact soil that's used for all of his dirt roads is just riding on ice. No matter how much work we've done to the tires, we can't fix that. It's just a game problem that Paboso probably won't ever fix. But we could definitely put the tires on the bikes.
It would help a little bit.
It'll
but
help
there
for
are still
the
core
rest
issues.
of the track, but
Yeah, there's still core
Yeah.
issues there that,
it would,
you know,
yeah, it would
nothing
still
we can do.
definitely help the overall rideability for sure.
All right, boys. Well, that's all the questions we're going to answer today. Did your questions get answered, or do you still have questions? If you still have questions, make sure to leave them down in the comments below, and I'll pass those on, and we'll probably do a part 2. I also know that they're looking into doing the future of the OEM video here pretty soon, so let me know if you're interested in that. And as always, boys, I love you, and I appreciate you guys hanging out. If you're here at the end, leave a .32 in the comments. All right, boys, I love you, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace!